Welcome, everyone, to this Good Leadership Podcast. My name is Charles Good, your host and the president of the Institute for Management Studies. This podcast is designed to provide you with actionable insights and tools that you can use from discussing the research, stories, and background from recognized experts and practitioners to accelerate your impact in your current role. My goal is what we've discussed today will be immediately actionable and useful to you, and I'd love to hear your comments for this episode about what you're planning on implementing. Today, I'm glad to be joined by Dr. Robert Bies, who's a professor of management and founder of the Executive Master's in Leadership degree program at Georgetown University. He has worked with Fortune 500 companies, as well as government agencies and nonprofit organizations on issues of leadership and change. Drawing from his consulting experiences and research, he focuses on 3 leadership core skills: building trust, storytelling, and delivering bad news and strategies to applying them. Today, we're going to talk about another one of his passions, a course that he's been doing at Georgetown University, Leadership Lessons from Hollywood. And we're going to be profiling different movies that really provide some great lessons for all leaders to benefit from. Welcome again to the program, Bob.
Glad to be back, Charles. Glad to be with you.
Before we get started, I'd love to kind of get a little bit of background on you about what developed your passion with movies and Hollywood, and talk to me a little bit about the course that you've taught at Georgetown on this topic.
Well, I first got into movies, started showing movie clips when I was at Northwestern University at the Kellogg School. And I was trying to make certain concepts come alive. And it's one thing to do a case, but I showed movie clips. People said, wow, that's really pretty cool. No professor's ever done that before. I will tell you this. People rarely remember all my lectures. They may remember some of the cases, but they always remember every movie clip and every movie I've ever shown. They remember everyone. Okay. So I really got into it. All of a sudden, I got this positive reaction. So now every class session I show out in any undergraduate MBA or executive MBA, they're always watching a movie clip to illustrate the points, because the movie clips are really stories, and little clips are pieces of the story that illustrate a key point.
That's great. I selected a few that you and I have agreed have great leadership lessons. So let's start with Miracle. And if you could just give a little background on this movie in case our listeners haven't seen it. And then maybe 1 or 2 insights from this movie or leadership lessons that they can take away and apply.
Well, Miracle's in my top 10 leadership movies. I mean, it's a true story about the U.S. hockey team. And the Soviet hockey team had been winning left and right, and the U.S. hadn't won in 20, 30 some years. And they hired Herb Brooks, who in the movie played by Kurt Russell, to be the coach and to try to get them back to the status to beat the Soviets, to win the gold medal in Lake Placid in 1980. And there's several leadership lessons that I gleaned from Miracle, and why I show it as a movie as well as a clips. One is that you have to change your approach if you want to change the outcome. And one of the things that Herb Brooks did is how he trained team. First off, when he selected the team, he didn't select the best players. He selected the best team. And a lot of people criticize his choice of, there's certain people over here, but he wanted people to play together as a team. And so I think the focus on teamwork, the focus on working together, and realizing that you had to change the approach if you want to change the outcome. And that's one of the key things I talk about. And without telling what happened until the end of the movie, do you believe in miracles? The famous Al Michaels phrase, that's why they call the movie Miracle. But also there's a couple other things that I show the movie for. And that is, one is that he was trying to get them with the concept of team, and they were having an exhibition and the players weren't watching. So he had them run out in the ice back and forth, and they were just getting tired and overwhelmed. They were doing this in the dark because the hockey rink was shutting down. And then he finally got Ruzioni to say this. And he said, yeah, who are you? And he said, I'm Mike Ruzioni. Who do you play for? United States of America. And he said this key phrase. He said, the name on the front of your shirt is more important than the name on the back of your shirt, which is their personal name. He wanted to have a shared mission, a shared focus, a shared goal, and was winning as Team USA. But I also show it for the inspirational speech given by Herb Brooks before they played the Soviets. Understanding the Soviets had beat them 10 days earlier in Madison Square Garden 10-3. And the Soviets were the best in the world, better than any NHL team. They were the best. And he gave a speech to inspire them. He said, 9 times out of 10, the Soviets are going to beat us, but not tonight. Not you guys. Everybody was just mesmerized because they believed they could be the Soviets tonight. And truly, I think Herb Brooks got them to unleash the greatness of who they are, not just individually, but more importantly as a team. And it turns out they beat the Soviets and they won the gold medal. In fact, in every hockey match in the Olympic thing, they always came from behind to win, including the gold medal. because it was a miracle. And that's the famous Al Michaels phrase. I remember watching it as a graduate student at Stanford. Do you believe in miracles? And we did. They beat the Soviets. But I think those key issues about changing process to change the outcome, the team concept is more important than the individual. And understand you had to inspire people, even at the end, you had to inspire them to realize that they could do this. It was possible if they worked together and did it together.
Well, I love the quote at the end of the movie that they said, I think it was Kurt Russell that said it as Herb Brooks. A group of remarkable young men gave the nation what it needed most, a chance for one night, not only to dream, but a chance once again to believe. And this movie acts as a great case study for any company looking to overtake larger competitors. And moreover, it reconfirms that David can win against Goliath. So let's move to the next one. Another one of my favorites, Apollo 13. So once again, give us a little background story and then key leadership lessons that we should be aware of.
Well, this one, Apollo 13, is also my top 10 leadership movies. I mean, it stars Tom Hanks, Ed Harris, Kevin Bacon, Gary Sinise, a bunch of great actors in it. It's a true story. It's when Jim Lovell and two other astronauts go up in space, and they're up there in space, and all of a sudden there's an explosion in space, and they're leaking oxygen. And so the movie is about how do you get the astronauts back safely? And for me, I show it because, again, it comes back to issues. Something happened unexpectedly. So what do you do with it? And if people were looking to Gene Kranz, people were looking to Jim Lovell on the ship, Gene Kranz down in Mission Control down in Houston. He was the Mission Control chief. They were looking to him for direction. And so when this happens, all of a sudden, the people in Mission Control in Houston were going, well, we just think, and Gene Kranz go, what do you think is going on? Something's going on. The instrumentation's flying all over the place. They were saying, well, it's got to be an instrumentation problem. And Gene Kranz said, well, there's booms and shimmies and all that. Lovell was saying, I don't think it's an instrumentation problem. Then they realized it was that. And all of a sudden, it stopped, now began to change. It was now, how do we rescue them to bring them back? Because they weren't going to get to do their mission in space. They weren't going to get to do that. And so the whole issue, when Gene Kranz realized, again, Ed Harris got nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He didn't win it, but he deserved it. And he said, people, calm down. Let's work the problem, people. Let's not make it worse by guessing. Those are his words. Let's work the problem. Let's not make it worse by guessing. And I think that's part of it. For me, one of the messages I want to take away, you all have problem challenges and crises, but how do you engage people to work the problem together towards a common mission to get the astronauts back? So when the whole movie is all about them working together up in space and here on Earth, how do you get them back under the most extreme conditions? And then there's a scene I show in terms of inspirational. I do my storytelling piece in my IMS session. I always show this piece where they're realizing the engineers are telling Gene they only have 45 hours of power left, and that's not enough to get the astronauts back. Gene is not happy. And John, one of his favorite engineers, says, whoa, Gene, guys, it's worse than you think. It's not 45, it's only 16 hours. Whoa, that gets Gene's attention. And he listens because that's the most important leadership skill. He listens, and then he gives a 20-second speech at the very end. Everybody knew his life or death. But he says, everybody's got to work together. He said, we've never lost an astronaut in space. We're not going to lose one on our watch. And they had a very famous phrase that became the title of his autobiography: failure is not an option. That was the key phrase. Failure is not an option. That galvanized them. And they was continually working together and dealing with the uncertainty. And they were getting pressure from NASA, but they kept focused on this mission, getting 3 astronauts back. They had a mission that took off when the rocket, took off. But the mission now is to get him back safely and alive, which is what it did. And I watched this movie many times. I know how it's going to turn out, but I still get engaged because it's all about collaboration, teamwork, and creativity and innovation. Because they had to put pieces together in the LEM to get oxygen to them. And they had to think on their feet, literally. And then Gene Kranz inspiring them with the famous phrase, failure is not an option.
I love that movie as well. That's where we get the famous phrase, Houston, we have a problem. And I love how Gene adapted his response based on the information of his team. And he faced reality as it was, not as he wished it would be. He identified solutions that were realistic and attainable. And when adversity arises, like it did there, leaders need to communicate, keep calm, hold the team together, work the problem. And they must be inclusive because nothing is more developmental and illuminating than dealing with adversity, according to Jack Welch. So great movie that hits on a lot of those key points, and every leader should watch it as what to do in a crisis to bring a team together and galvanize a team as well.
I think also, Charles, it goes back to Gene was a signal sender, and they looked to him for signals, and he galvanized them, as you said. Absolutely.
Well, let's go to another one of my favorites. And this, I know is in your top 10 as well, Invictus. So give us a background and some leadership lessons from this great movie.
It was directed by Clint Eastwood, and the title Invictus is taken from a poem named Invictus. And it's the poem that Nelson Mandela used to read on an almost daily basis when he was in prison for almost 27 years. But let me bring it back, Invictus, and why it's such a powerful movie for me for leadership, because it shows a lot of different aspects. One is when Nelson Mandela got released from prison in the early 1990s. He came out and they wanted to run for president of the Republic of South Africa. And he decided to run apartheid and began to disintegrate. And he became the president of the Republic of South Africa. But the key leadership lessons for me is he realized in order for the Republic of South Africa to come out of apartheid strong and whole, he had to figure out a way to get blacks and whites working together. How do you allow whites and blacks working together when apartheid existed and blacks had no role? And most of them were either, bodily harmed or put in prison. And so one of the things he did is he decided that he wanted to form an alliance with the rugby team Springboks. And that was the poster child for apartheid. And Black South Africa didn't understand why Mandela was doing that. But he understood that he needed to bring the country together. Nothing brings a country together better than a sporting event. Okay. If your team is winning the championship, it brings them together. And so what he decided to do was form it with Francois Pignard, played by Matt Damon, and said, I want to work with you because we need to win the World Cup, which happened to be in the Republic of South Africa that year. And so we formed an alliance, a collaboration. So I show that piece about the importance of collaboration, bringing people together, forming alliances to achieve greatness. That's what he realized, to achieve greatness. But also I show the movie because it showed him as really a political actor. He knew that he had to keep Springboks, he needed to have them supported because the whites controlled the banks, they controlled the police, they controlled all the things that were so important to the country. And so when they were going to change the name of Springboks and change the name of the colors, he went to them and said, I'm going to make you a plea why. And they kept the name in the Springboks. He had used his political capital to achieve the mission control. It wasn't about him. It was about, for him, saving the Republic of South Africa. But then I use a scene where he's speaking with Francois Pignard, trying to persuade him why to enlist him in the mission to do this, because he wanted him to win the World Cup in rugby. And so he gives this powerful speech to him to inspire him. So it's leadership is storytelling, and how he talked about the time he went to Barcelona for the Olympics, and they sang the new South African anthem, and he was so inspired to come back, and he was trying to inspire Francois to inspire his teammates to raise their game, literally to do that. But also I use it for an example of persistence and resilience, because Nelson Mandela was truly a man of persistence and resilience. And again, to go back, the new title of the movie is Invictus because he read this poem about being tough. The challenges are going to come to you, but you're stronger than you think you are. You can do more than you think you can. It sustained him. So I use that as he had a bigger vision, and a vision of united South Africa. And I think different aspects of that and how he made it happen. He laid the foundation for possibility of a future of the Republic of South Africa that was so different than apartheid South Africa.
That's great. I love the movie. And as you know, organizations can only thrive on vision statements. Often they have them printed on posters, wallets as a reminder of what they're working for. But nevertheless, the real challenge always lies in providing an insight into the vision. Give people a taste of what the future has in store for them by communicating to their individual ambitions, get them excited about the possibilities, the opportunities, and finally make it real through the vivid images that conjure up a better tomorrow. Because all talk and no action doesn't make visions real. The hard work, the motivation is what is required to turn those into a reality. And this movie demonstrates that very effectively. So moving to our next one, I love this. Devil Wears Prada. Tell us why you think this has some valuable leadership lessons for our listeners, because on the surface, it's maybe not that apparent.
Well, it's a great question. Well, first off, anything with Meryl Streep I'm watching, but The Devil Wears Prada I choose because it really illustrates the issue is a leader, an abusive boss, or a master motivator. And I think sometimes it's both and leadership. Was Miranda Priestly, the character played by Meryl Streep, an abusive boss? Absolutely. Was she a master motivator? Absolutely. She inspired people to excellence, much like Steve Jobs. If you can look at Steve Jobs, I mean, he was seen as a demanding, abusive boss, but he also inspired people, put that ding in the universe in June 2007, that little iPhone that everybody now takes for granted. He inspired people to greatness. I think that's one of the lessons I have people watch. You can focus in on leadership style. When I use these leadership lessons, it doesn't necessarily mean they're good examples of leadership. Sometimes they're bad. When you're an abusive boss, that's a bad thing to do. Okay. You humiliate people, you embarrass people, you make them feel like less than 100%. But also what she did was she inspired people to excellence. People wanted to work hard. If you look at Andy Sachs, the character played by Anne Hathaway, she realized in order to become great, Amanda was inspiring her to greatness. And I think that's what the key issue for me is. She inspired people to greatness, but she clearly had a point of view, and she was a difficult, demanding boss, but she also inspired people to greatness. And I think sometimes when we look at people, yes, we want people to be nice, but maybe not achieve the greatness of what they do. And I think, again, Steve Jobs is like that. He demanded excellence. I think that's the key thing, Miranda. She demanded excellence. And get excellence, sometimes you have to demand it. But here's the deal. Everybody wanted to go work for her, even if it was demanding, because they knew they would become greater and they probably get a better job, but they became better at who they were, even if it was demanding. It was like a 1-year boot camp or longer. They just kept at it and become better and greater. But she had a vision. She had a vision of excellence, and she communicated that consistently. So I look at, she had a vision and was consistently communicated. And she didn't play favorites. The only favorite was it had to be excellent. It had to be better than before. And that was one of the key lessons that I take why I have my students watch, whether they're undergraduates or beyond, they watch The Devil Wears Prada.
Thank you, Bob. I agree. Maybe her approach wasn't ideal, but she did teach people going through her leadership course, you had to be quick on your feet. Your first job is not likely going to be your favorite, right? Know the industry, dress your part, and prove your mettle. And that excellence was very instilled in everyone right from the start. She didn't compromise on that. She knew where to draw the line to some extent, but she forced excellence to be drawn out, kind of like what Herb Brooks did. I watched one of his interviews after that movie and with the real Herb Brooks, and he said, I wasn't trying to put greatness into him. I was trying to draw it out of them. And many people don't know how hard to push themselves. A great coach, a great mentor, a great leader knows how to push you to get the excellence out of you, to realize your full potential.
I think that's a great comparison. I think Herb Brooks was as demanding as Miranda Priestley in different ways. Okay. But it was to unleash the greatness of who they are and who they were. How do you do that? They may have different styles, but they both were very demanding. And the results speak for themselves.
Great lessons. And now we're nearing the end, but I can't end this episode without talking about my favorite movie. Please don't judge me, but it's Rocky. Lots of lessons in this movie. I would say for achieving anything great in life, overcoming impossible odds. It has a kind of a myriad of influences from the movies we've spoken about. And it's really just a great American story. So Bob, give us your insights on it and what lessons you see from this movie.
Well, first off, anytime you hear the iconic song, "We're Gonna Fly Now," I mean, come on, that's Rocky. Running down the boulevard, running through South Philadelphia is wonderful. I think for me, the lessons from Rocky, and I do think it's a great American story about an individual who had a dream. And he also had people believe in him. Okay, he had Adrian, he had Mickey, he had people that believed in him. And you can't achieve the greatness of who you are unless you have a dream and put all the time and effort. I think one of the lessons from Rocky is how hard he worked to become that. To fight Apollo Creed, he had to work hard. And there were sometimes he just wanted to give up. Nope, he just kept at it. And he was persistent. But I think also part of what makes Rocky so great is he started to win. He started to get better. And even though after the first one, I won't tell people how it turned out, but even after the first one, there's going to be a second one. Because even though he didn't beat Apollo Creed, he beat Apollo Creed because he had a dream, he worked hard, he was persistent, but he didn't do it alone because you can't do it alone. I think it's one of the leadership lessons. We always focus on Rocky, but sometimes we need to focus on Adrian. Sometimes we need to focus on Mickey because they were key and instrumental to that, making that happen. But he believed. Once he began to believe, he was willing to run hard, run through all of Philadelphia, put in the time, put in the effort because he believed. If you get people to believe in the mission, they will do what is ever necessary to achieve it. But again, they have people supporting him, but he believed. I think it's one of the key things I take away from the movie Rocky, apart from the The music's great and the boxing's great. And it showcases the wonderful city of Philadelphia, where my wife is from. It's just a beautiful story about dreaming and believing together and working hard to achieve the dream and the beliefs that you can be the best at who you are and what you do.
Very well said. I loved it for so many reasons, for what you mentioned and more, going the distance. In the original movie, he did win the fight. And if you watch the movie again, his goal was to go the distance so that he wasn't just another bum from the neighborhood. He just wanted to prove to himself more than anyone else that he wasn't that kind of person, that he could go toe to toe with someone. And that's important to know in business, because when business is all about winning, leadership requires humility. Don't set unachievable goals. That can be just as damaging as setting goals too low. Address challenges openly and know that for every individual inside the company, big or small, they're making a difference. Appreciate them. You don't need a CEO title to do it. The other things I love about Rocky are you have to earn it every day. There's no room for complacency in business as well, right? It's easy to become comfortable when things are going well and when you're on top. But the very best know that what got you there, what got you to the pinnacle, to the peak, is not what's going to keep you there. It takes hard work every day. And Rocky learned that lesson multiple times to have that. And perhaps the biggest lesson that I learned is don't let others take your dreams away. Everyone said he was washed up. Yes, it's a fictitious story. It's loosely based on a true story with Muhammad Ali, but it's a real American tale because it's the power of realizing your dream and not letting people talk you out of something that you feel like you were meant to do. So great movie, great stories. Bob, are there any other movies that we haven't mentioned that you would encourage our listeners to watch to learn additional leadership lessons?
There's a few movies that I recommend people to watch. One is I'd have them watch Hidden Figures, because it shows the power of women who are allowed to unleash the greatness of who they are. It's a powerful story. It's a great story. I also think that I would recommend Remember the Titans. Again, inspired by a true story. It's got Denzel Washington as the lead actor, who is a great actor. It's a true story about how he created a team in a time of racial and social unrest in Alexandria, Virginia. I also would recommend people watch the movie Steve Jobs, the one with Michael Fassbender, because I think it gets a keen insight into Steve Jobs. Wozniak said the movie didn't exactly capture all of the accuracy of Steve, but it captured the essence of Steve. And I think that's one of the key things I have. I'll give you a couple other ones that I'd highly recommend. One is that I would recommend Moneyball, because we're in the baseball playoffs right now, Moneyball, because it was important about being innovative with analytics. Now analytics dominates every sport. But Billy Beane was an innovator, and he got pushback from all the people who said it can't be done, it won't be done. But I think he demonstrated it could, but he believed and he made it happen. The other one, and this is, I know will surprise people, but I think one of the great leadership movies is Toy Story. If you go back to Toy Story with Tom Hanks and Tim Allen as the lead characters, you saw about the importance of leadership, but also teamwork, working together, the sense of shared identity. Those would be movies I recommend. I know Toy Story seems like an interesting one to put on the list, but I think it's all about leadership, teamwork, and making things happen.
Well, thank you, Bob. And I agree with you on that. Thank you for those additional recommendations. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you.
You can reach me at Biesr, Biesr at georgetown.edu. And I do check my email, much to the consternation of my wife. I check it at all times of day and night.
Thank you, Bob, for joining me again. This concludes this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. If you like what you heard today, please share it with your colleagues and friends and anyone else who might find this valuable. If you'd like to subscribe, this podcast can be found both on Apple and Spotify, and also can be accessed on the Institute for Management Studies website at ims-online.com. Until next time, remember, it's not what you know, but what you do consistently that makes a difference.